Lucas woke up on his 30th birthday with a quiet hope, expecting nothing grand, just the familiar warmth of family messages and maybe a small gift. He had always been content with little gestures, knowing his parents' love didn't need to be shown in extravagance. But that morning, the usual comfort never arrived. Instead, his phone buzzed with a single cold message. "All your gifts are going to your sister this year. Congratulations." At first, he stared in disbelief, thinking it must be a mistake, a glitch, some cruel prank. But the absence of any laughter or clarification told him everything. The words were deliberate. They weren't just denying him presents. They were denying his existence, his place in the family for this milestone birthday. His stomach sank, a hollow feeling spreading through him, sharper than he expected. It wasn't just about the gifts. It was about being erased, dismissed, made invisible. He thought of Mara, his sister, always favored, always smiling, always somehow managing to turn his parents' love toward herself. She had perfected the art of subtle manipulation over the years, and now, on the day that was meant to celebrate him, she had claimed the spotlight without earning it. Lucas's mind raced as he paced his apartment. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, mixing with disbelief, sadness, and the sharp sting of betrayal. He replayed every memory of birthdays past, how his parents had carefully chosen gifts, how their small acts of attention had made him feel loved. And now, those moments felt stolen. Mara's smug face flashed in his mind, already imagining her excitement, her laughter filling the room, the gifts stacked before her as if by some cruel cosmic joke. He felt a surge of heat rise in his chest. It wasn't just resentment. It was a burning need for acknowledgement, a demand for justice. He wanted to confront his parents, to yell, to make them see the unfairness. But he knew their hearts were blind to the truth. They had been charmed by Mara for years, deceived by her subtle lies and careful smiles. They wouldn't understand. Not yet, not without proof. And proof would take time, patience, and careful observation. He sank into a chair, running his hands over his face, trying to calm the storm inside. The coffee on the table had gone cold, but he didn't notice. Every thought circled around Mara, and the injustice of the moment. He remembered the small betrayals over the years, the times she had twisted his words to their parents, taken credit for his ideas, presented herself as the responsible, grateful, perfect child while he was painted as careless or self-centered. And yet, he knew he had always worked harder, tried harder, cared more, and still, she had claimed victory. He clenched his fists, a mix of frustration and determination tightening in his body. This wasn't just hurt. It was a challenge, a provocation. Lucas realized that his reaction now would define him. Would he crumble, fade into the background as he had for years? Or would he rise, reclaiming the respect and recognition he deserved? The hours passed quickly, though they felt slow. Lucas moved through his apartment mechanically, preparing for the family gathering that evening. His parents' home should have been a place of warmth, but today it felt like enemy territory. Every step toward leaving, every breath reminded him of the message, of the way his parents had allowed him to be sidelined. He imagined Mara in the living room, surrounded by gifts meant for him, her laughter loud, triumphant, echoing through the halls. That image ignited a spark he hadn't felt before. Anger, yes, but also clarity. He didn't want a momentary outburst. He wanted control, strategy, a way to reclaim the narrative without losing himself. Revenge, he realized, didn't have to be violent or destructive. It could be subtle, precise, the kind that gave him power without dragging him into darkness. Lucas thought about every small detail he could use to his advantage. Every opportunity Mara had taken to undermine him, every lie she had told, every subtle manipulation. The fire inside him grew, not just with anger, but with purpose. He began to understand that this birthday, the betrayal, was more than just an insult. It was a turning point. He could continue to let himself be a pawn in the game Mara had always played, or he could take a step back, observe, and prepare. The realization was both frightening and exhilarating. He felt the weight of years of favoritism, of being overlooked, and for the first time, he felt the desire to turn the tables. By late afternoon, Lucas's mind had shifted from shock to determination. He reviewed every family interaction, every conversation, every smile that had hidden manipulation. He made mental notes, planning silently, calculating. The anger was no longer chaotic. It was focused. He imagined confronting Mara, not with yelling or accusations, but with undeniable proof, with patience and precision that would leave her no room to escape accountability. The thought gave him a strange satisfaction, a quiet sense of power returning to him. He realized that the emotional sting of betrayal could either destroy him or fuel him, and he chose the latter. As evening approached, Lucas dressed carefully, hiding the turmoil inside behind a composed exterior. He didn't want the family to see the storm raging within him, not yet. Every step toward the car, every breath, reminded him that this was only the beginning. He would attend the gathering. He would watch. He would observe. Every laugh, every smug look, every whispered compliment Mara received would be noted. He was no longer just a victim of circumstances. He was a strategist, a silent force gathering strength. By the time he reached his parents' house, Lucas felt a strange mix of tension and control. The house buzzed with celebration, but he viewed it through a lens of calculation. Mara's victories were on display, but he would not let them define him. The message, the betrayal, had lit a fire that he now carefully tended. He understood the stakes. He understood the rules of the game. And most importantly, he understood himself. The first part of the story, the shock, the betrayal, the realization was over. What remained was the choice of what to do next, the careful planning of how to reclaim not just what was stolen, but his sense of self. For Lucas, this birthday was not an end. It was a beginning. The moment when he decided that being wronged would no longer mean being powerless, and the story of revenge, patience, and strategy had just begun. After the birthday gathering, Lucas returned to his apartment, the noise and laughter still ringing in his ears. The betrayal had settled into his bones like a slow-burning fire, a constant hum that refused to be ignored. He could still see Mara's smug smile, the way she had pranced around with the gifts that were supposed to be his, basking in attention as if she had won the world. Every detail replayed in his mind like a video on loop. The way their parents had laughed at her jokes, the way they had commented on her outfit, the little remarks that made him feel invisible. Lucas realized that the pain of the moment was not enough. It had to be transformed into purpose. He sat at his desk, opening a notebook he had bought months ago but never used, and began to write. Each word on the page was deliberate, a way to map the battlefield that was his family dynamics. He listed every slight, every manipulation, every instance Mara had twisted the truth to her advantage. Each memory was a puzzle piece, and he needed to see the whole picture before acting. Sleep came fitfully that night, broken by dreams in which Mara laughed and he stood frozen, powerless. He woke in the early hours, mind buzzing with strategies and possibilities. Revenge, he realized, was not about confrontation in the moment. It was about timing, patience, and subtlety. He began observing Mara's habits more closely, studying Her routines, her interactions with friends and family, and even the posts she made on social media. Each small detail became valuable intelligence, a potential advantage he could use to reclaim his dignity. He noted her pride, her little habits of self-promotion, the way she relished attention. Every insight built a mental map of the person who had caused him so much pain, and with each observation, his resolve grew stronger. He didn't want to destroy her. He wanted to expose the imbalance, to reclaim what had been denied. In the days that followed, Lucas wrestled with his emotions. Anger flared like lightning, sometimes sudden and blinding, while guilt and doubt whispered in quieter moments. He questioned himself. Was it worth it? Could he act without becoming what he despised? Could he use his intellect and patience without letting bitterness consume him? These questions haunted him, especially when he saw Mara celebrated for achievements that had little substance or had been exaggerated by her careful storytelling. He realized that revenge could feel sweet, but only if it didn't cost him his own peace of mind. Planning, he decided, was the key. Quick retaliation would only satisfy the momentary desire for justice. Strategy would provide enduring victory. Lucas began to craft a plan that was subtle yet impactful. He considered his strengths: observation, intelligence, and patience. He would not act impulsively. He would gather proof, create situations that revealed Mara's manipulations naturally, and allow the truth to emerge without him appearing vindictive. He envisioned a series of small actions, arranging conversations so that contradictions in her stories became obvious, carefully documenting interactions that exposed her exaggerations, and finding allies who had witnessed her subtle manipulations firsthand. Each step was calculated, and with every imagined scenario, his confidence grew. The fire of betrayal had been transformed into a precise instrument, a way to channel anger into purpose. At the same time, Lucas's mental and emotional state became a battlefield. He fought the urge to act too soon, to confront Mara impulsively. He recognized the dangerous allure of immediate satisfaction, the temptation to lash out and claim a hollow victory. The smarter path required patience, self-control, and observation. He spent hours reflecting on his values, considering the kind of person he wanted to become. Could he be victorious without stooping to deceit or cruelty? Could he reclaim his dignity without perpetuating harm? These questions were not easy, and the tension of unanswered decisions weighed heavily on him. Yet he felt an unfamiliar thrill, the kind that comes with planning a move no one else sees. The quiet power of being several steps ahead, of holding control over the narrative that had long eluded him. Lucas also began examining his own weaknesses. He realized that part of Mara's success came from his occasional self-doubt, his tendency to avoid conflict, and his hope that the family would always recognize fairness naturally. He vowed to change that. The revenge he sought would not only expose Mara but also reinforce his own boundaries, asserting his value in ways he had previously avoided. The thought of finally being acknowledged, of seeing Mara confronted with the truth in a subtle but undeniable way, fueled his determination. Every small plan, every strategy, every calculated observation was a step toward restoring balance and reclaiming the respect he deserved. As the days turned into weeks, Lucas's preparation intensified. He started keeping a detailed journal, recording incidents, noting inconsistencies, and mapping relationships within the family. He paid attention to the smallest details: how Mara phrased her stories, the timing of her social media posts, even the expressions on his parents' faces when they reacted to her comments. Each piece of information was a building block in a plan that was still unfolding. The process sharpened his mind and clarified his intentions. He discovered that revenge, when approached thoughtfully, was less about malice and more about restoring equilibrium. The clarity gave him a sense of power he had never felt before, a knowledge that he could act strategically, calmly, and decisively when the time came. Meanwhile, Lucas's emotions were in constant flux. Anger still surged unpredictably, but he learned to channel it into observation and planning rather than outbursts. Sadness lingered, a reminder of the betrayal and the emotional gap left by his parents' oversight, but it no longer immobilized him. Instead, it became fuel, motivating him to act carefully and purposefully. He began to feel a quiet sense of control returning, a reminder that he had the ability to shape his response, rather than being shaped by the actions of others. The emotional struggle was intense, but it also revealed something vital. True strength lay not in immediate retaliation, but in the patience to wait for the right moment, in the clarity to act with precision, and in the self-awareness to ensure that justice did not turn into cruelty. One evening, as Lucas reviewed his notes and reflected on recent family interactions, he experienced a moment of insight. The betrayal that had seemed like an endpoint was actually a beginning. Mara's triumph was temporary. Her manipulations could be revealed without him compromising his own integrity. The key was to remain calm, to observe, to document, and to allow the truth to unfold in ways that exposed her naturally. He felt the sense of purpose growing inside him, a steady determination that replaced the chaotic mixture of anger, pain, and frustration. The fire of betrayal had transformed into a tool for strategic action, a way to reclaim not only his dignity, but also his sense of control over his life and his narrative. By the end of part 2, Lucas was no longer merely the wronged brother. He had become a strategist, carefully observing, planning, and preparing for the moment when the truth would reveal itself. The anger that had threatened to consume him had been honed into focus, the sadness reshaped into purpose. He understood that revenge was not about immediate satisfaction or public spectacle. It was about reclaiming his power, restoring fairness, and asserting his value. He was ready for the next stage, where observation and planning would meet action, and the consequences of betrayal would finally be addressed. Part 2 closed with Lucas poised on the edge of transformation, his mind sharp, his resolve steady, and his plan forming into something formidable. The stage was set for the climactic confrontation, but the battle would be waged with intelligence, patience, and the unshakable knowledge that he controlled the narrative. Not Mara, not his parents, and not the circumstances that had once left him feeling invisible. The night of the family dinner arrived, and Lucas felt a tension in his chest that made every step toward the house feel heavy yet electric. He had spent weeks planning, observing, and documenting, preparing for a moment he knew would define him not just as Mara's wronged brother, but as someone who could reclaim control over his own life. The house smelled of roasted meat and cake, the familiar scent of family gatherings, yet to Lucas, it felt like stepping onto a battlefield. Mara was already there, glowing with excitement, surrounded by the gifts that had been taken from him, her laughter cutting through the air like a blade. Every glance she cast toward their parents was a reminder of how skillfully she had maneuvered through life, always seeming to win without effort, always leaving him in the shadows. Lucas's mind raced, reviewing his plan with painstaking precision. Every word, every movement, every choice had to be deliberate. He clutched the envelope in his pocket, small and unassuming, yet filled with months of collected evidence, messages, documented conversations, and proof of Mara's manipulations that their parents had never seen and would not believe without solid evidence. As the family chatted around the table, Lucas observed silently, noting subtle expressions, slight hesitations, and the way Mara's smile faltered when she thought no one was looking. The tension in him grew, a mixture of anger, anticipation, and a strange excitement that came from knowing he held power that no one else suspected. He thought about the countless scenarios he had imagined, confronting her directly, exposing her in front of everyone, watching the shock register on their parents' faces. But now, standing at the threshold of action, he felt something else. The weight of consequence. Acting in haste, in anger, could destroy more than Mara's carefully curated image. It could trap him in the same cycle of bitterness he had fought to control. The envelope burned in his pocket, a silent reminder of the choice before him. Revenge. That would satisfy momentarily, or restraint, that might yield long-term strength. The evening moved forward with the rhythm of small talk and laughter, punctuated by Mara's gleeful unwrapping of gifts. Lucas felt a strange detachment, as though observing a scene from a distance, yet his heart pounded with every new triumph she claimed. He could almost hear the whispers of the past, the countless moments where she had subtly undermined him, the quiet manipulations he had endured, the favoritism that had left him feeling invisible. He imagined exposing it all, letting the truth crash down like a storm, letting everyone see what he had suffered, letting Mara face the consequences of her actions. The temptation was almost irresistible, a lure so powerful that for a moment, he imagined the satisfaction of immediate justice, of seeing her forced to acknowledge the pain she had caused. But the longer he watched, the more he realized that satisfaction gained through anger could never feel complete. It would be temporary, and he would remain tethered to the past, defined by bitterness rather than freedom. Lucas took a deep breath, steadying himself. He thought about the path he had chosen over the past weeks, the careful observation, the patience, the planning. All of it had been to ensure that when he acted, he would not just win, but also preserve his integrity. He considered his options. Once more, he could reveal the evidence now, shatter Mara's image in front of their parents, and feel the rush of triumph. Or he could wait, allow the truth to emerge in a way that did not compromise who he was. The moral weight pressed on him. Revenge could easily become cruelty if wielded hastily. True victory, he realized, was not in making someone else feel small, but in reclaiming himself, asserting his value and emerging from the experience intact. Pivotal moment came when Mara glanced at him with a mischievous smirk, clearly expecting him to feel diminished, to remain silent and humiliated. Lucas met her gaze and held it, the fire of betrayal replaced by calm calculation. In that instant he made his choice. He reached into his pocket and felt the envelope, the evidence that could destroy her carefully built narrative. And then, with deliberate care, he returned it to his coat. He would not use it tonight. He would not allow anger to dictate his actions. Instead, he smiled faintly, a small but meaningful gesture that spoke of his quiet confidence and inner strength. Mara noticed the change, the subtle shift in his demeanor, and for the first time, there was a flicker of uncertainty in her expression. Lucas did not gloat. He did not lash out. He simply existed in the space between confrontation and observation, showing without words that he was no longer powerless. The evening continued, and Lucas engaged in conversation, observed interactions, and noted reactions, all while maintaining a composed exterior. He watched Mara, still unaware that her victories were temporary, that her manipulations were documented and ready to be revealed in the right moment. The tension in the room was palpable to him, though no one else seemed to sense it. He understood now that power was not always about immediate action. Sometimes it was about restraint, about patience, about waiting for the moment when the impact would be greatest. He could release the evidence anytime, but the strategic choice to wait ensured that the outcome would be meaningful and precise. Not just emotional. As the dinner wound down, Lucas felt a profound sense of clarity. He had faced the temptation of revenge and chosen a different path. The envelope in his pocket represented not just evidence of Mara's manipulations, but a symbol of the power he held over himself. By choosing restraint, he had reclaimed control, proving to himself that he was not defined by the wrongs he suffered, but by the choices he made in response. The moral lesson was clear. True victory did not require cruelty and satisfaction gained from deliberate, thoughtful action far outweighed the fleeting pleasure of immediate retaliation. Leaving the house, Lucas felt the tension ease slightly. Mara remained unaware of the depth of his observation, of the careful planning that had taken place over weeks. His parents had no idea of the subtle manipulations that had led to the morning's betrayal. Yet Lucas felt a sense of triumph rooted not in exposure but in self-mastery. He had faced the ultimate moment of temptation and chosen a path that preserved his dignity. He realized that the journey of revenge was not a single action but a process, a struggle between desire and morality, and that the real power lay in making choices that aligned with one's values. By the time he returned home, Lucas's mind was both calm and sharp. He had entered the evening as a wronged brother, consumed by anger and betrayal, and emerged as a strategist, confident in his ability to navigate both family dynamics and his own emotions. The climax of the story was not in confrontation or dramatic exposure. It was in the decision to act with intelligence, patience, and restraint. The envelope remained in his pocket, a silent promise that when the right moment arrived, the truth could be revealed without sacrificing who he was. He felt a quiet satisfaction, not from punishing Mara, but from reclaiming himself, asserting his worth, and understanding that power over one's actions was the greatest form of revenge. The night ended with Lucas sitting alone in his apartment, reflecting on the journey that had begun with a cruel message on his birthday morning. He understood now that revenge was not a matter of striking back in anger, but of reclaiming control, asserting value, and navigating the delicate balance between justice and morality. Mara's temporary victory had been deflected, not with confrontation, but with strategy, and in that deflection, Lucas found something far more enduring than satisfaction. He found freedom, clarity, and a sense of self that no betrayal could diminish. He knew that the story was far from over, but the most critical moment, the choice between impulsive revenge and measured restraint, had been made, and he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more in control than ever before.